just had a segment on the show. It was called Recap of the first half of the year. And one of the categories that we had on that was the shaking my head moment of the first part of the year, meaning what should have not happened in the world of boxing in the last 6 months. What's your shaking my head moment?
Well, I guess one of them was AJ and Fury not happening. Of course, that was the shake of the head.
Wow.
Floyd Mayweather against Logan Paul, that was a big shake of the head as well. I guess a lot of it is a story of the fights that don't happen. You know, I think in boxing, we love to moan, don't we? We're all passionate about boxing, and there's a lot of fights that didn't happen that probably should have, but isn't that just boxing? Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's just the first half of the year, that's just every year, every month. You know, Terence Crawford against Errol Spence, Demetrius Andre, you know, not yet getting the Gennady Golovkin fight or the Charlo fight, but I think if there's any major shake of the head, for me, it was Floyd against Logan Paul. For me.
Yeah, well, I agreed with you because that's exactly what I said. Well, speaking of fights that I thought was not going to happen, I never knew that Canelo would go back to 175, but you made some comments recently that Canelo would go up and fight Beterbiev. But at one time, even his trainer, Eddie Reynoso, said he's not a 175-pounder. What changed?
Well, he's definitely not a 175-pounder, that's for sure. We've seen him up there before, beat Sergey Kovalev for the WBO world title. I think really it's just a case of everybody wants the Caleb Plant fight. There's been some discussions now with their team, and we hope they'll become more advanced as the week progresses, because we want to make a call probably next week on the fight that Canelo will take in September. I think the talk about the 175-pound fights were in Mexico last week when, you know, I was there with Eddie and Saul as well. And it was just that if we can't get the Caleb Plant fight, obviously we need another dance partner for September. He's not going to go back to 160 ever. So his choice is to defend his championships at 168. But I think he just prefers to take on champions. I mean, that's the flavour that I'm getting. And actually, when you look at the resume, take Yildirim out because that was a mandatory he had to take, otherwise he'd lose the belt. He's gone Danny Jacobs, who was a world middleweight champion, Sergey Kovalev, who was a light heavyweight champion, Callum Smith, who was the #1 ranked super middleweight champion, and Billy Joe Saunders, who's a WBO middleweight champion. It's unbelievable. 4 of his last 5 fights have been against world champions. So I think he likes to do that. And I think when he looks at his options, I think moving up to take on a champion would appeal to him a lot more than just making a defense. And when you look at those options, you know, you have Joe Smith, you have Dmitry Bivol, and you have Artur Beterbiev. Dmitry Bivol is probably the easiest fight to make because he works with us. But Artur Beterbiev is a fight that Canelo, you know, sickly wants. You know, he's sort of talked about that fight. He knows how hard Artur Beterbiev punches. And Canelo's a competitor. You know, you tell him that's not the fight to take, he'll want to take it. You know, let's not forget, this guy has boxed 3 times in, you know, 7 months, 8 months. And his 4th fight will be 4 fights in 10 months, which as a pound-for-pound #1 in a pandemic is incredible. So I think that, you know, my instructions from Canelo Alvarez and Eddie Reynoso were, you know what we want. We want Caleb Plant, but if that's not possible for September, show me the champions we can face. And, you know, clearly a move up to 175 for now is also on the agenda if that undisputed fight can't get made.
Right. Well, your good friend Oscar De La Hoya had some comments about Canelo recently, and he was comparing Canelo to Ricardo Mayorga. What do you think about that?
I think the whole thing's quite sad, really. You know, I think when people have a great relationship, you'd like them to split with some humility. You know, it's always good to shake hands and just say, listen, we've had a great run. You know, the shots that get fired are disrespectful and quite ridiculous, really. And there's nothing against Mayorga as a fighter, who's incredibly entertaining. Yes. With Canelo Alvarez, you're talking about a generational great. You're talking about a pound-for-pound #1. You're talking about a guy that may well be unbeatable in the sport of boxing. You're talking about a guy that has transitioned this generation of Mexican boxing, and he's idolized by not just people in his own country, but in the US as well. You're talking about a guy that carries himself with an incredible amount of humility and honor. And he needs to be respected, you know, and he's a great, but clearly there's always been that, you know, butting of heads with Oscar, and you know, he continues to take his shots at Canelo, and I just think Canelo gets on with his business. He's an incredibly focused fighter. He's an all-time great, and you know, I feel that sort of legacy and that kind of respect and honor comes post-career. But let's enjoy Canelo Alvarez while he's here. And if you're talking about Plant next or Bivol next, you know it's going to go something like Bivol, Plant, Beterbiev, like Charlo. I mean, this is just the most incredible run.
Yeah.
Like, let's respect it and let's actually enjoy it, because we live in a world where we just talked to the opening segment of the show. We moan about fighters not facing other champions or not doing unification fights or not trying to be undisputed. Here you have a guy that's doing all of that and doing it like every few months. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's not about comparing resumes. It's just about saying, this guy, what he's doing right now is incredible. Like, he could quite easily just go, look, Plant's not happening in September, so Eddie, just get me a defense. Like, everybody's doing that. Yeah. He's not interested in a defense. He wants to fight a champion. He wants to go and win another belt. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, and it's not, and again, when you go up to light heavyweight, you might say, okay, who's the weakest champion right now? Well, probably, no disrespect, but because they're all great champions, probably Joe Smith. You know, Bivol beat him nearly every round. You know, let's go get Joe Smith. No, let's go Beterbiev. You know, or let's fight the undefeated Russian Bivol. Like, it's crazy what he's doing. No. I've never, like, with the boxing business, fighters generally need to be protected, you know, from themselves, because they want competition. But we do live in an age now where even the fighters look at it more as a business, and that's right, because it's incredibly dangerous. But this guy, you know, there's never any easy options mentioned. Even when it was Yildirim, it was a bit disappointing for him that he had to fight Yildirim, because he wanted to go straight in and fight a champion.
All right, listen, you mentioned Jamal Charlo. We just had Jamal on recently, and his tone has kind of changed a little bit, at least to the public, in regards to Boo Boo Andrade. He's saying that he's able and ready to fight. Let's make the fight happen against Andrade. How realistic is that fight?
I mean, I saw Stephen Espinosa yesterday say that, you know, Charlo wasn't tied to Showtime and he wouldn't stop him taking that fight anywhere else. That was music to our ears, but at the same time, we're not tying, and Dazn won't tie Andrade to Dazn if that fight presents itself, because you have to let these guys fight these kind of fights. I just think it gets to a stage, and I think they were a bit lucky with the Montiel fight, to be honest with you, because Montiel is not an elite level fighter, but although Charlo won virtually every round, it was an okay fight. It was quite competitive. Mm-hmm. I think. And actually, Charlo's got to be careful that he doesn't start fighting to that level, and because he's a brilliant fighter. So when you're Charlo, you've got to be careful that you don't become almost like a Terence Crawford and keep taking these fights that's actually going to deplete your value. Like, he's in his prime, Charlo. He's a tremendous fighter. So's Demetrius. So, like, but the more they keep taking those kind of fights, the more they're going to miss their boat, and the more they're going to miss their prime. So I just hope that something can be done to make that fight. It's so, like, if you talk about in the UK, when you've got two domestic world champions, right? So you've got Charlo, fantastic fighter, American world champion. Demetrius Andrade, fantastic fighter, American world champion. Both middleweights. If we can't make that fight, we should just pack up. Do you know what I mean? Like, if there was two middleweights in this country, in Britain, that wanted to unify, it's quite a straightforward thing to happen. And everyone, even, you know, Charlo's now saying the right things, but it's going to take or, you know, Showtime or us to make the offer and someone say, yes, that's the right thing for both guys. Because I think we all agree, right? That is the right fight for both.
Oh, for sure.
They both need that fight, to be honest with you.
I want to know what was your take on the whole Mexico event? You know, the first event with Canelo and Eddie Reynoso, and also big news in the UK with the big new broadcast team out there, adding some new spice to the broadcast. Talk about those two things for me real quick.
Well, Mexico was brilliant. I mean, you know, when you love boxing and you go to Mexico, it makes you fall even more in love with the sport. Yeah. You know, because I sat down at 4 o'clock and Eddie Reynoso told me about this kid who was 17, right? And he said he could be the new Canelo. He said, what a talent. Anyway, he came out, he didn't look 17, he looked 12, right? He fought a kid he was just a beast, right? You wouldn't put this kid in, like, if this kid was not 17, if this kid was 27 and 15-0, you probably wouldn't put this kid in with him, right? It actually ended up being a draw. I felt the young kid won the fight, but it was a draw. Wow. And the kid come out after, and he was like, you know, cut, bruised, out of breath. And I thought to myself, wow, how tough do they breed them here? You know, we live in a world, don't we, where an undefeated young prospect would get to 20-0 before you even gave him a proper fight.
Yes.
This is how they learn. This is where they learn. And you go into those gyms, mate. You know, you look at Julio Cesar Martinez, who I think is just a star in the making, right? I think he's so exciting. You want to see where he comes from. I mean, you know, there's hoods and there's hoods, right? This kid, and the passion for boxing. These kids, these fighters are so tough, and the card was so good, and everyone's ready to take the chance. Everyone's ready to have a war. Everyone's ready to roll the dice. And these Mexican shows are going to be a great adventure. So that was brilliant. And the next one's going to be announced. It'll be in August. So we'll announce that next week. And the new talent lineup in the UK, just sensational. I mean, Mike Costello, who, you know, we have a big channel here called the BBC, which is like a national channel, right? It's like your ABC. Mm-hmm. And he has been a boxing broadcaster and athletics broadcaster for years and years and years. And getting him is a major, major, major coup. Maya Jama, who is fantastic, you know, one of the most current, sort of coolest, trendiest presenters across sport and music and entertainment now. She's going to be our host. Laura Woods, who does the Premier League football for Sky Sports. Andy Lee, you know, one of the best voices and commentators and analysts in boxing. Tony Bellew, again, first-class speaker, first-class presenter, first-class commentator. And then Chris Lloyd and Darren Barker. I guess they're our Ak and Barak. You know, those two, you know?
Don't disrespect us like that.
Yeah. They're the sort of engaging boxing experts.
No doubt.
Across all our coverage. And it's very exciting. You know, it's so exciting to be able to build that team and the global adventure continues.
So Usyk Joshua 25th, right? September 25th. Usyk Joshua.
I did an Instagram live and someone asked me the question and I almost forgot I was on Instagram live and I was saying, looks like September 25th at Tottenham. Next thing, like every paper in the UK was like, confirmed. So I guess I've blown it now, but yeah, it's the world we live in.
All right, well, thanks, Eddie, as always, man. Catch you next week.
Take care. Cheers.
You too, brother.
Cheers.